There is a bird, so small you might miss it entirely. A flicker of brown, a twitch in the hedge, and yet kings have been crowned in its name. Saints have been betrayed by its voice, and the sun has been outwitted by its cleverness. Today we're talking about the wren, the little king, the hedge witch, the sacred thief, the bird that reminds us that power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sings from the brambles. Welcome, dear listener, to Wishcrafting. I am so delighted you're here, because today we turn our gaze to a creature that has hopped and sung its way through both wild landscapes and human lore, the wren. This tiny bird carries an immense presence in stories, songs, and traditions around the world. It's been called Little King, Sacred Thief, Hedge Witch, and even the bird that outsings the world. Small but mighty, the wren looms large in the imagination. So, gather close as we peer through the window to the outside and look to the little bird thrashing the tapestry of brown and gray leaves littered beneath the great juniper tree. If you're ready, let's peek our minds into the world of wrens. Let's start by meeting the wren. What does a wren look and act like? Picture a small bird, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, round-bodied with soft brown plumage, streaked or barred with darker shades for camouflage. A wren often carries its tail cheerfully cocked upwards, a perky little flag that gives this bird a ton of character and is one of my favorite things about them. They are just so sassy. Now, while wrens' bodies may be petite, with some species weighing no more than a few pennies, their voices are huge. This bird is famous for a song disproportionately loud and vibrant for its size. It's not an exaggeration to say that wrens can outsing birds many times their size. I was recently outside, enjoying an unseasonably warm day, and I'd sat so long on the bench near the edge of the forest that the whole entire forest forgot I was there. And it began going about its business right around me. And it's my favorite when this happens, but on this day, as such, a tiny wren had hopped up right beside me, and I'd not really noticed it at all. Which I felt kind of sad about later, as I'd really have enjoyed the opportunity to look at it up close. But anyways, it hopped right beside me, and we didn't really notice each other. And because it didn't notice me, or maybe because it did, it sang its song. For the wren, it was singing, "Oh hey, there's no food over here." But for me, I may as well have put my head into an air horn. It was so loud. Not only were my ears ringing, but I also jumped so high because it scared the bejesus out of me that I scared away the entire forest that was peaceful doing their thing into a chaotic mess. A sunning turtle flopped into the swamp, a scurry of squirrels scurried into the high canopies of the pines above me, and at least a few other species of feathered friends cawed and squawked and haffawed their way away from me as fast as they could. And I jumped, caught myself on my own feet and fell over, and I was suddenly laying in the dirt with my cover completely blown and the wits scared out of me. That little teeny tiny bird almost gave me a heart attack. But you know what? That is the wren. Most folks say that their song sounds like tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. And you'll hear that in their bright cascade of notes before you ever see the actual bird themselves. I'm just lucky, I guess, that one decided to damn near puncture my eardrum by showing me its song up close. But wrens do have a way of being heard but not seen, as they are often singing from deep within a brush pile or hedge. These birds love hedges. The song of a wren is rich, melodious, and astonishingly powerful, which to me announces that this small bird is bold and unafraid. Here, see how this song strikes you. This is the song of the Carolina wren. But wait, there's more. That is not a wren's only call. Most birds have various calls. Calls that say, hey, come over here, or don't come over here, or look out, hawk, or whatever it is that birds need to say to each other. A wren is a pretty large family group with wrens nearly everywhere except Antarctica and Australia. And with a group of birds that are so widespread, that's a lot of different calls. Some wrens have rather plain, uncomplicated calls, but others, the super extra of this already extra family of birds, have incredibly complex calls, which we'll circle back to later on. They're also quite quick, with the wren's movements being almost restless. They flit from branch to branch or scurry in and out of crevices with astonishing speed. These little buggers are fast, and that cocked tail often twitches very expressively, especially when the bird is alert or agitated. Wrens have this curious habit of peeking into nooks and crannies. They are peekers. They're gonna peek, man. They're gonna peek under leaves. They're gonna peek between rocks. They're gonna peek into old flower pots. They're gonna peek into your window. And they're peeking because they're in search of spiders and insects to eat. They're primarily insectivores, patrolling their little patch of territory for tasty bugs, caterpillars, and beetles. With their bright, beady eyes and slender, down-curved bills perfect for probing into cracks, the wren is the picture of alertness. It always looks like it has some mischievous plan cooking. In our last home, we had a ton of bird feeders in our backyard, and the wrens loved it there. They would hop right up to our sliding glass door, which we had placed some reflective stickers on for the birds, and they would just cock their head, cock their tail, and look. They loved looking at us. And I swear, I know they don't have eyebrows, but they had spiritual eyebrows with the way that they were judging and inspecting what the fuck we were up to. It was so adorable, honestly. And we had so many wrens because we really were right on the edge of a old growth forest, and the hedge that separated the forest and the neighborhood, which was great for us. We loved that. But wrens are very often found in between places of the landscape like that. In the wild, they love hedgerows, the borders between fields and forest, that are full of thickets, brambles, and tangled vegetation. They skulk around old stone walls and ruins, and they'll duck into any little hidey hole that might shelter them. Piles of brush or firewood, overgrown shrubs, the cavities under tree roots, these are wren domains. In fact, the scientific name of the Eurasian wren is Troglodytes troglodytes, which literally means cave dweller, or one who creeps into holes. Wrens thrive in these sheltered liminal spaces. They also famously are adaptable to human dwellings and gardens. If you have a shed, porch, woodpile, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a wren as your tiny tenant there. Here in the Carolinas, the Carolina wren is particularly known for embracing our human-made nooks. They'll nest in flower pots, mailboxes, old boots, garage shelves, any cozy cavity that they deem safe. And yes, people have opened up old shoes left on porches to find a wren's nest inside. It's me, I'm people, but I'm not the only people that's happened to. These little daredevils have been known to sneak into garages or barns and start building nests in the most unlikeliest of spots. I've heard of wrens nesting in a hanging bicycle helmet, in the pocket of a coat left outside, even in the spare tire on the back of a Jeep. Wherever they choose, they seem to have a sense of humor in their nest choices, as if they're testing the limits of where a bird can raise a family. And it's not that they need our weird artifacts, but they're opportunists, and they're clearly quite imaginative. All this is to say that wrens live at the edge of our world and the wild. They're comfortable in the margins, the brushy fringe of a forest, or the eaves of your back porch. This has made them our close companions, whether we like it or not. As we tend our gardens or stack our firewood, the wren is there, darting in and out, keeping an eye on everything. And in many ways, wrens have evolved alongside humans, taking advantage of the changes we make to the landscape. They were present in ancient farmlands bordered by hedges. They followed European settlers and then to American homesteads. And today they thrive even in suburbia. Where we build, wrens often find a way to make a home too. They're survivors, and they are adapters. Despite their delicate size, wrens are tough. They hold territories and defend them fiercely. A wren will scold intruders with rapid chattering or dare to dive bomb a cat or a crow that comes too close to their nest. It seems like they have no idea that they're tiny, and honestly, I don't think they would care if they did. I have watched a little wren puff up and yell at a passing hawk as if saying, "I see you, keep flying, Buster." And that feisty attitude is it's part of their charm. They have a sass and a boldness that is endearing and admirable. While many other small birds might shrink or fly away from the danger, the wren stands its ground and gives a piece of its mind, all in rapid, rattling chirps alongside a crooked up tail. These birds are also keenly observant. If you move something in their environment, a wren is going to be the first to pop over and inspect it. And it might decide that it's a great new perch or a nest hideaway, but it might not. Either way, this inquisitiveness helps them find food and shelter in all kinds of circumstances. Wrens survive where others might have disappeared. They manage to endure cold winters by hiding in crevices and cuddling together for warmth, and they bounce back quickly after storms. Even in habitats that are fragmented by development, wrens find the remaining thickets and make them their home. They're the little tenacious spirits of the bird world, quick, clever, and resilient. So, in meeting the wren, we meet a creature that is physically unassuming but full of surprises. A tiny body with a mighty voice, a soft brown bird with a sparkling personality, and quite a bit of attitude, and a being that thrives in liminal spaces and alongside our homes. No wonder the wren has worked its way into so much folklore and magic. Humans have been sharing space with these little saucy fellas for a very long time. Let's dive into those stories now, because the cultural life of the wren is just as fascinating as its natural life. The wren has earned the title King of all birds, which sounds like a fairy tale, and that's because it is. One of the most famous wren legends across Europe, found in Celtic folklore and British tales, is the story of how the wren became the king of the birds. The legend goes that long ago the birds of the world decided that they wanted a king to rule over them, but how could they choose one? Eventually, they agreed on a contest. Whichever bird could fly the highest would be crowned the king. Now, of course, all the birds took off and began flying upwards in all their might. The mighty eagle confidently soared above everyone else, climbing higher and higher and higher, and eventually all of the other birds dropped down one by one as they tired, until it appeared that the eagle alone would win the crown. But, unknown to the eagle, a tiny wren had cleverly hidden itself in the eagle's thick feathers right there at the start of the contest. The eagle hadn't noticed his little stowaway, and just as the eagle reached the peak of the flight, straining at thin air and unable to go any higher, the wren popped out from between the eagle's feathers, and with a cheeky chirp, the wren fluttered a few feet above the eagle's head, technically flying higher than the eagle had. And when the eagle had to admit defeat, all the other birds were astonished. True to their agreement, the wren, the smallest of them all, was declared the king of birds for outsmarting the competition. What a trickster victory, right? The bold eagle, a clear symbol on its own, was outwitted by a tiny, clever bird who used strategy instead of force. It's a story with a clear moral. Cleverness can triumph over strength, and wit can beat brute power. The wren story is the ultimate underdog tale. Rather than a play-by-play of the eagle's rules, Wren invented its own rules. Hide and hitch a ride. And it won in the end. Some might call it cheating. Some might call it ingenious. The other birds likely had a mix of admiration and irritation at being duped. And in some versions, the eagle is so angry at being tricked that later it refuses to even look at the wren. And that's why wrens hide in hedges to avoid the wrath of eagles. And, can you blame the eagle for being salty? Regardless, this legend made a deep impression into folk culture. In many European languages, the name for wren reflects its royal status. For example, in German, the wren is called Zaunkönig, literally hedge king. And in Dutch, one traditional name is Winterkonigisch, or Little Winter King. Even in English, one nickname for the wren is King of the Hedgerows. The symbolism is there, and it's rich. Intelligence is sovereignty. The wren didn't need to be big and strong to rule. It needed to be smart and a little bit sneaky and a lot willing to do what it had to do. This is the celebration of the power of cunning. We see in this tale the archetype of the holy fool or trickster, the small character who upends the social order with wit. It's akin to a jester who, though lowly, can outwit the king, or the folk hero who uses brains over brawn. The wren embodies that trickster energy in a sacred context. It becomes king through an act of clever subversion. In many cultures, tricksters are revered, even if they annoy the powerful, because they remind us not to underestimate the little guy, and they teach us that thinking outside the box can change the game entirely. The wren is very much this kind of figure in bird form. In a sense, the wren is a patron bird of the clever and underestimated. In folklore, there are further tales of the wren's craftiness. Some British stories show the wren outsmarting predators like foxes or cats just by trickery alone. One tale tells of a wren that tricked a pursuing hawk by driving into a narrow crevice where the larger hawk couldn't reach, and the wren, tucked safely into its little nook, laughed and laughed and laughed while the hawk was just fuming. Always one step ahead, these wrens. So, when you hear the wren called the Little King, remember that it's not about physical size or typical majesty, but the spark of intelligence and daring that can elevate even the least likely candidate to greatness. That teeny tiny bird flitting in your hedge carries itself with the confidence of a king, and now you know why. Are you in love with the wren yet, like I am? It's okay if not. I have more to tell you, because the wren's royal status in folklore is only one side of its story. Now, let's explore a stranger, darker, but more equally fascinating tradition involving wrens, one that ties them to the cycle of the seasons, the sun, and the turning of the year. For this, we have to journey to Ireland and parts of Britain to the celebration known as Wren's Day, or St. Stephen's Day. Every year, on December 26th, the day after Christmas, which is St. Stephen's Day in Christian calendars, something unusual used to happen in villages all across Ireland, the Isle of Man, and other Celtic regions. Groups of boys and young men called Wren boys would dress in old costumes or straw disguises and would go out hunting the wren. They would actually chase down the tiny bird, and in the olden days, they would kill one, which is the sad part and maybe shocking to us as a people now. And once they caught and killed a wren, the little bird's body would then be carried on a decorated pole, sometimes perched on top of a holly bush, and sometimes paraded through town. The wren boys would go door to door with the captured wren, singing traditional wren songs and playing music. Villagers would give them coins, food, or drink in exchange for a feather from the wren, or to simply be part of the revelry. It was a very macabre mix of trick-or-treating and parading. One traditional song went, the wren, the king of all birds. St. Stephen's Day was caught in the furs. Although he is little, the honor is great. Jump up, me lads, and give us a treat." The furs means gorse bushes, implying where they had caught the wren. After marching around and celebrating or mourning in a mock funeral, the wren, they would often bury it with a great ceremony at the end of the day. In some places, the feathers of the wren were preserved as good luck charms and said to protect a home from lightning or other bad misfortune and to bring good fortune into the new year. Now you're probably thinking, like me, why on earth would they do this? Especially if it's the king of the birds, a sacred little king. And that's an excellent question. Folklorists have pondered this, and it seems to hark back to ancient pagan winter solstice rituals and symbolism. The wren in this context was thought to represent the old year or the old sun. The winter solstice happens around December 21st, and by December 26th, people are ceremonially bidding farewell to the sun's cycle. Sacrificing the king of the birds, the wren, the king from the year gone by, could symbolize the death of the old king, the old sun or the old year, so that the new king, the new sun and the new year can reign. It's a ritual of ending and rebirth, because at the time it was believed that the sun was dying and a new sun was being reborn. And there were many different folk practices that reflected this belief. In essence, the wren became a scapegoat figure, a bearer of the old year's misfortune, sacrificed to cleanse the slate for a new year. This is the kind of ritual sacrifice of a symbolic animal or figure that was actually pretty common in many ancient cultures when moving from one yearly cycle to the next. It was a way to collectively release bad luck, hardship, or evil and load it onto the symbolic victim, in this case the wren, and then expelling it through the act of the hunt and then the burial. As strange and gruesome as it might sound, it was ceremonial and sacred in its original intent, and it was not done simply for mere cruelty. That doesn't mean I endorse it, but it is good to understand the cultural context. With the coming of Christianity, the tradition was wrapped in a new story, and the day chosen was St. Stephen's Day. So people explained the hunt with the legend of St. Stephen, who I'll talk about more in a moment, being betrayed by a wren's call, thus avenging the saint on his feast day by punishing the traitor wren became a very convenient Christian justification for this pagan practice. Two layers of meaning intertwined. One was solar and in tune with the turning of the wheel, and the other was distinctly Christian. I want to let you know that in modern times, no one is actually harming wrens in these celebrations anymore, thank goodness. The tradition still survives in places like parts of Ireland, like Dingle or Kerry, and as a living festival on December 26th. But the wren is now usually a very fake bird, or effigy of a bird, or sometimes they don't use any figure of a bird at all, and it's just the name of the day. Oftentimes people dress up in colorful costumes or straw outfits, play fiddles and accordions, march and parade through the streets, and sing wren songs for fun and for charity. These days it's more about music, community, and remembering than a literal bird hunt. In some small towns they even have a big community feathered wren doll as the centerpiece rather than anything real. So modern Wren Day celebrations are all about community and spirit and tradition, and no wrens are harmed in the making of this holiday. Thank you very much. When I first learned about Wren Day, I was a little bit heartbroken. The idea of killing this little bird, for any reason really, was tough for me because I'm so fond of them. But understanding the deeper symbolism helped it make a little bit more sense in context. It was never about malice towards wrens specifically. In fact, you might say that it was because the wren was so revered and honored that it was the one that was chosen because it was king of the birds. But it was about the weighty experience of what was the end of the year. In ancient and antiquated times. That was a really hard point in the year, and it's as if the wren was a stand-in for the sun itself, dying at the end of the year so it could be reborn, have its legacy and claim to its kingdom that much more vindicated. It's heavy stuff for such a tiny creature. But also consider this. The wren is a bird of winter in many places. In Ireland and Britain, wrens sing even during the coldest months, when many other birds are silent or have migrated. They are active around the solstice, heard in the hedges on short December days, so they became associated with that turning point of the year. There's even some lore that the robin, another beloved bird associated with Christmas, is the new sun or new year, and that the wren represents the old sun and old year. And some stories say that the robin kills the wren on New Year's Day, taking over as king. The wren bridges a transition from dark to light, old year to new, winter to spring. Whatever the story, whatever the region, these stories together form a clear picture of the cycle of cunning and triumph, as well as necessary surrender to time's flow, all wrapped up in the tiny symbol of the wren. The wren, cunning survivor that it is, of course survives even this symbolic death. Each year there are always more wrens singing, and in a way too we can symbolize that. You can never truly vanquish the spirit of cleverness and resilience. It's always going to pop back up, year after year after year, singing from the hedges once more. Now that we've seen the wren crowned as king, let's talk about the wren's role as a truth teller and a betrayer in legends, particularly involving saints. There are old Christian legends, because of course they're Christian, where the wren gets a bit of a bad reputation for making too much noise at the wrong time, and thus thwarting holy men. But as we'll see, there's a twist. That very noise can be viewed as a sacred revelation. What I'm speaking of is the most famous story about Saint Stephen, who I just mentioned earlier in relation to Wren's Day. Saint Stephen was the first Christian martyr, traditionally said to have been stoned to death around 33 AD for his faith. The Irish legend holds that Stephen was fleeing from his persecutors, hiding in hedgerows or bushes, trying to lay low and save himself. A wren, attracted by the movement or maybe something else, began to flutter and chatter loudly near the hiding place. Its sudden burst of song gave away Stephen's location to his enemies, leading to his capture and eventual death. Because of this, the wren earned the dubious honor of being called the devil's bird, or the traitor's bird in some Irish folk circles, at least in the Christianized interpretation. People said that the wren's chatter had betrayed St. Stephen, and thus the bird deserved punishment, which led to the Wren's Day hunt rationale. A similar type of tale is sometimes told about St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, or about the soldiers in wartime. One story goes that while St. Patrick was out on a mission, a wren's incessant chirping tipped off his enemies and foiled his plans. Another non-saintly tale from Irish history claims that during an ambush, Irish rebels were sneaking up on an encampment of their adversaries, and they'd almost caught them when a wren flew down and started pecking on one of the drums they carried, making a loud rat-a-tat that woke up the enemy's camp, thus ruining the element of surprise and causing them to lose the battle. All supposedly due to the meddling wren. Because of this, the wren was cursed as a traitor in folklore. I said it before, I'll say it again. That's a heavy price to put on such a tiny little guy. I don't know, that's a heavy crown to hang on such a tiny little head, but on the surface, these stories paint the wren as an untrustworthy little blabbermouth seemingly siding with the enemy, but let's think a little bit deeper. And in terms of symbolism, the wren cannot help but sing. It's doing what it naturally does, creating noise, chattering, living out loud, and in a sense, the wren in these legends represents truth or revelation that cannot be hidden, even for the sake of convenience. If someone holy is in hiding, the wren's voice pierces the silence and reveals what is concealed. This can be seen as a betrayal, but it could also be seen as truth, honesty. It's like the universe saying, no secret, no silence, the truth will out you. In fact, some interpretations say that the wren isn't acting out of malice because it's just a bird, but rather it's simply speaking the truth of the moment, singing its song, which happens to expose the things people wish to keep hidden. And there's something really powerful about that idea. Think of moments in life when a small voice speaks up and changes the entire situation. It might feel like a betrayal to those who wanted the silence, but ultimately it's just a form of revelation. This role of honest revelation is one that the trickster plays often and that apparently the wren plays quite well. The wren's chattering in these tales can be seen as a form of apotropaic sound, a fancy term for noise that wards off evil or breaks a spell. In many cultures, making noise is a way to drive away bad spirits or to bring in clarity. For example, bells have been rung to ward off demons. Loud chants have been used to break enchantments. Pots and pans have been banged all around my house to get out the bad juju. In the wren's case, its sudden noise disrupted the status quo. From a saint's perspective, unfortunately, it meant capture, but from a cosmic perspective, maybe that was fate or truth asserting itself. In this way, the wren becomes a kind of whistleblower of the spiritual realm and blows the whistle, or rather sings the song, for when the silence is expected, and it shakes things up because of it. There's discomfort in that, but there's also purity in that. Over and over we see that the wren's voice is powerful. It's often been associated with prophecy and weather lore, where its call, its movements, where it goes, how it lands, all of these different things have been used in divination. Specifically in Welsh lore, people would observe wrens closely, believing that their chirps or the direction that they flew in could predict coming weather or even the year's fortunes. A noisy wren could mean a big event approaching, and a quiet wren meant an extended period of peace was likely to happen, among 5,000 other interpretations. Regardless, in this context, its voice wasn't the devil's doing, but an oracle. There's a lesson I want you to take here, and it's really simple. Speaking up, making noise, telling the truth can all have very serious consequences. Yes, but that doesn't mean that they're not sacred or necessary. The wren's way is one of integrity, one of my ultimate core values as a human being. The wren's way is to sing with a full heart, regardless of who or what is nearby. It's a kind of wild integrity that is comfortable in silence, but also comfortable singing the truth song that might feel like chaos, but that leads to needed change, and that at the core of it all feels authentic. So I honor the wren in these stories, no matter what role it's playing. It held on to its nature and it kept singing. And perhaps on some level, people have always respected that. Why else would you make it a central figure of songs and rituals? The wren spoke when silence was expected. and that is magical in its own way. In the context of the saint's story, it led to martyrdom, which in the Christian view is holy fulfillment or destiny. In the context of battle, it forced fate's hand. The sacred noise of the wren reminds us that sometimes the smallest voice can reveal even the biggest truths. And if you've ever heard a wren scolding you in your garden, you know that that truth sounds a lot like an unstoppable, rollicking stream of chirps that demands to be heard. It might be sassing you, but it's also potentially telling you to wake up and pay attention. Before we move on, because there is more, there is more. I love this bird, and I like talking about this bird. But before we move on, to hop just a little bit back into the natural life of the wren, we can apply as much symbolism as we'd like to the natural life of anything. And I often do here on the show and in my life all the time. But that's not often needed for wonder to be inspired within us from watching nature. My favorite thing about the wren's voice is quite natural and has nothing to do with magic, but is magic all on its own. You see, wrens are one of the only birds who change their song. What that means is that baby male wrens will spend their adolescence learning their songs, their specific song, specific to them, from their dad. And then they get to a certain age, they go out into the world, and they spend so much time. They take time, a rumspringa, if you will, to go and perfect their song. And then they come back to their community once they've perfected their song, and they try and find a mate, which is so cute. Oh my god, it's so cute. It's the best thing ever. But it gets better, because wrens will actually vocalize for fun, often creating songs just because they like to sing, and they like to sing with their neighbors. Wrens often never show up anywhere alone. They're always rolling at least 10 deep to the function. And when they get together and they're at peace, they will often vocalize with one another, forming incredibly complex harmonies together because they like it. It's just for fun. There's no reason other than they enjoy singing together as a community. And this is more common with South American wrens, but it's still something that they do, and they're the only bird that does this. And that is the coolest thing ever, and it makes me emotional. And if you wanted to apply symbolism to that, there's something there about the strength of community and the strength, sacredity, and, just importance of creativity, pleasure, and joy within your community, whether that's your home ecosystem, your group of friends, your whatever it may be. Co-creating and connection simply for the sake of connection is really important. It's so important that we can look out our windows and see this tiny, unassuming creature engaging with it quite often for no evolutionary purpose other than that they like it. And I don't know, it blows my mind every single time that I think about that. And I could talk about that for a while. I could talk about the wrens forever, but we don't have forever. So, for now, since we've explored the wren's folklore in human society, I want to step a little bit more into the mystical realm, because wrens aren't just storybook tricksters or symbolic sacrifices, they're often regarded as creatures of the threshold, and we love a creature of the threshold here on Wishcrafting. Wrens are often inhabitants of liminal spaces, and liminal spaces are where the magic happens. In other words, wrens are natural hedge witches, and they have a reputation for being so, and for being able to move between worlds. As we described earlier, wrens love hedges, thickets, stone walls, cracks, eaves, all sort of little physical boundaries. A hedge, especially in Celtic folklore, is more than just a row of shrubs. It marks the boundary between the tamed garden and the wild woods, between the village and the unknown beyond. Hedges were seen as neither here nor there, neither fully cultivated nor fully wild, and thus imbued with a kind of magical potential. The term hedge witch in modern paganism refers to a practitioner who works in those wild margins, and who can cross into the spirit world, which is often called hedge riding, or crossing the hedge. The wren, flitting in and out of the hedge, is almost like a guardian of that mysterious boundary, where the hedge is a doorway to the other world in folklore, where fairies might slip through or spirits might pass. The wren stands watch, small but observant. In some traditions, wrens are associated with the fairy folk. There's an Irish belief that the wren is a fairy in disguise, or a messenger for the fairy realm. This ties back to a Manx legend, where the story goes that there was once a powerful fairy or enchantress who would lure men in and cause mischief. To stop her, a wise man cast a spell that transformed her into a wren. But, even as a bird, she was wily and hard to catch. Finally, she was captured, on St. Stephen's Day no less, which some say was the true origin of the wren hunt, symbolically catching the fairy witch. But in any case, the idea remains that a wren might not be what it seems. So, if you see a wren hopping about on an old ruin or a sacred well, who knows? It could be a fairy being keen and keeping an eye out for intruders. Because wrens are so often at the threshold, folks have imagined them as messengers between the worlds. An old European superstition holds that if a wren flies into your house or taps on your window, it could be bringing you a message. There's a gentle eeriness to that thought, but also comfort. The wren as a tiny postman to and from the other side, delivering signals in its songs. In Welsh and Irish folklore, there were divination practices involving wrens. In some instances, simply the presence of a wren could be suspicious, and killing a wren outside of the designated ritual day was considered incredibly bad luck, like harming a fairy or an emissary from the gods, which you do not want to do. This protected status hints that people sensed that wrens were special and sacred, and not to be meddled with. I mentioned it before, but we'll dive a little deeper now. Wrens appear in bits of old folk charms and weather sayings in weather magic. One such bit of weather lore says that if a wren is loud and merry, you'll have a good day, and if he's hiding silent, a storm is on the way. Farmers would listen to the wren's morning song as a natural barometer. And another belief was that a wren's feather, kept in a wallet, would ensure that money never runs out. Maybe that's because the wren is the king of birds, and a king brings in prosperity. Who knows? But that's my guess. Sailors, particularly in the English Channel and Irish Sea regions, sometimes would carry a wren's feather as a talisman to guard against storms and shipwrecks. They believed that the wren, being favored by the sun, could keep storms at bay. Simple, but these practices reinforce how deeply woven into daily magic the wren was. And then, of course, there's the notion of witches and wrens. Some stories claim that witches could shapeshift into wrens and spy on people. Think about it. If you wanted to gather secrets, what better disguise than a drab little bird that can slip into eaves and windows and go unnoticed. In many ways, the wren embodies discretion and secrecy, while at the same time, it represents bold proclamation. What a paradox! It's like a little secret keeper who also knows when to speak up. No wonder cunning folk resonated with this animal. That's exactly the balance a lot of them had to strike in times when witchcraft was frowned upon. You had to keep to the shadows, but also let your power be known enough to where the people that needed you could come to you. If you walk in an old forest and come upon crumbling stone ruins covered in ivy, listen out for the wren. They often nest in the nooks and crannies of abandoned buildings, old cottages, old chapels, or stone circles in the Isle of Man and Celtic regions, and I like to imagine that they're the guardians of forgotten places. Those little sentinels keeping the energy alive with their song. They flit in and out of broken windows and ancient houses like tiny spirits. It's easy to imagine that the wrens are carrying the secrets of and through the ages. Perhaps they know what happened there so long ago, and they sing bits of its memory so it doesn't get forgotten. In your own backyard, if you have a wren resident, you might sense a certain vibe, like your home is protected by this feisty little guardian, or that it's bringing a lesson or a message for you. They'll certainly alert you if anything is amiss. I've heard people say that a wren nesting near your home brings good fortune and protection, almost like the wren agrees to watch over the house in exchange for a little bit of garden space. So, in the wren, we find a creature that is literally a liminal creature living on boundaries, and in folklore can move between worlds. A bird of both sunlight and the shadowy hedgerows, a friend of the fairies, and a bold singer at the threshold of your door. These birds are small, yes, but brimming with magic. In a sense, you could call the wren the witch of the bird world, brewing enchantments in its little nest cauldrons, as they do build round, dome-shaped nests. And if you've ever felt drawn to the subtle magic of liminal things, dusk, doorways, crossroads, think of the wren and its realm at the hedge. There's so much we can learn from these tiny guys and how to exist between, how to be both quiet and loud, hidden and seen, humble and regal. Now, I know we're pressing to be quite a long episode here, but we're almost done. I wanted to leave this episode long so that you could see clearly how we can take something simple, like a bird, and turn it into the powerhouse of magic that it is or could be. This is the pathway for a correspondence to be born. So let's talk about the magical correspondences for the wren. At this point, you probably have some ideas, but you also might be wondering how you can connect with Wren energy, WRENERGY, if you will, or bring some of its magic into your own life. And as you might be able to tell by now, it offers a treasure trove of inspiration for those of us who are seeking that guidance from nature. So let's break down the core symbolism of the wren and some ways you might work this energy into a practical, magical way. The wren teaches us the power of cleverness and ingenuity. Remember how it outsmarted the eagle? Wren energy is all about finding clever solutions to big challenges. It's the patron of those who must use their brains over brawn. If you're in a tight spot, channel the Wren's ingenuity and ask yourself, how can I think differently about this? Is there a hidden opportunity I can jump on? And the Wren might just inspire a breakthrough out of nowhere, a bit of cunning to help you succeed. It also teaches us how to be bold and to carry a fearless spirit. Despite being small, Wrens are fearless little firecrackers. They defend their territory, voice their displeasure, and won't hesitate to dive at a threat. Symbolically, it's about courage and assertiveness. Wren energy can embolden you to stand up for yourself, even if you feel small. It's that fighting spirit that says, I may be little, but I have a right to occupy this space. Sometimes, the Wren reminds you that size doesn't matter when your heart is fierce. Of course, the Wren also teaches us how to use our voice and our expressiveness as a tool. With the loudest song per ounce of any bird, the Wren represents the magical power of voice. This isn't just about speaking loudly, it's about using your voice to influence the world. Wrens sing to mark their territory, to attract mates, and to connect. In human terms, Wren energy is excellent for communication magic. Singing, chanting, speaking the truth, speaking your truth, it's all about finding your voice and letting it ring out. The Wren tells us that our words, our songs, our poems can be spells in their own right, each note carrying intention. If you struggle to be heard, think of the Wren and know that even a small voice can be mesmerizing and commanding. One of my favorite ways to tap into Wren magic is to conjure up the energy of the Wren by either envisioning it in my mind, watching a video, listening to its song, or just opening my window and watching them for a little while. And then singing a song boldly and loudly that has lyrics or a message that I want to manifest into my life or declare into my day. Wrens also teach us adaptability and resilience because they survive in harsh winters. They build homes in strange places and they bounce back from adversity. They symbolize adaptability, the ability to adjust and thrive no matter what life throws at you. In a magical sense, this is survival magic. It's not always about grand heroics, but often the quiet resilience and flexibility to use what's at hand and make brilliantly do with the available resources you have. Wren energy helps you to land on your feet and encourages you to use everything around you as a tool or an ally. And let's not forget the sacred cunning aspect of the Wren, the trickster energy that it brings to the table. The Wren is a tiny trickster who can represent the ability to outfox or outwren oppressive forces, whether that oppression is an unfair boss, a social injustice, or even your own negative thoughts. Wren energy can help you find the loophole, the clever hack, the way to slip out of the trap. It's a survivor's cunning. It's not malicious, but it is the kind that protects and liberates. It reminds us that sometimes a bit of sly strategy is necessary to break free or get ahead, especially when direct confrontation isn't going to work. In short, the Wren's symbolic keywords are cunning, boldness, vitality, adaptiveness, power, and voice. The Wren carries a spark of joy and cheekiness too. It's not a dour sort of magic at all, but a lively, mischievous, sassy, energetic, vital kind. You might consider invoking Wren energy when you feel underestimated or small, when you need to speak up or speak truth, during liminal times or transitions, when quiet survival is wiser than a loud battle, or when you need to take the more subtle route to success. The Wren validates that path. And all the others I just mentioned. Simple Wren charms could be to literally just whisper your wishes or your worries into a hedge, as if you are speaking directly to the liminal guardian of that transitional space. You could walk along a hedge as a walking meditation and invite the Wren into your aura, your mind, your space, yourself. You could sit along a hedgerow and ground and center yourself and ask for psychic messages or intuitive feelings in your body from the Wren's energy, pulling from the other world through the liminal space that is the hedge, the threshold, and delivering it to you as it is the tiny postman of the space between worlds. You could ask the Wren to join you when you need to reclaim your voice or speak in front of a group of people. You could invoke or evoke the energy of the Wren. You could have a picture of the Wren on your mirror and say things like, "I am heard. My voice is clear. I sing my truth for those who have ears," while looking at the picture of the Wren. That could even do. You could imagine the spirit or a spirit form of a Wren perched on your shoulder, egging you on, tiny little body puffed up and cheering, "Louder! Let it out!" It might feel silly at first, but that's okay because Wren magic is playful. It's meant to be playful. You could consider singing a song as a ward or a blessing at the threshold of your home, and so much more. Be playful, be creative, and encourage that energy if it is calling to you, because it is so available and it is so fun. But these are just a few ideas. Really, any act of clever improvisation, joyful noise making, or acts of sovereignty can be a tribute or part of Wren energy. When you tune into the Wren, you are tapping into a well of ancient, earthy magic that has been acknowledged by humans for centuries. This is a tiny bird, but it has the heart of a wizard and the soul of a poet. And in combination, its aura is huge. Work with Wren energy when you need a little bit of that subtle, sly, song-filled power in your life. Subtle until it's not, okay? I will add that in. Subtle until it's not. Subtle until it needs to not be subtle. That's the magic and power and grace, even, I might say, of the Wren. That's all I have for you today. I appreciate you sticking with me if you have done so. Believe it or not, I have more to say on the Wren, so if you want to learn more and how to deepen your practice, or just to have something concrete to look at or print out, I will have more info over on my Patreon and more writing on my Substack all about the magic of the Wren and working with this little king. To close our time out today, I want to offer you a tiny blessing, just a few poetic lines to carry with you in your heart. You might even imagine, as I read this to you, a little Wren perched nearby or on your shoulder, listening and nodding in agreement as you take in this blessing. May you remember the Wren when the world tells you that you are too small. May you sing anyway. May you survive along the threshold. May you outwit the storm. And may your quiet magic crown you king in your own becoming. Thank you, dear listener, for joining me on this enchanting journey into the world of the Wren, these little kings, these sacred thieves of hearts, certainly thieves of my heart. I hope you have enjoyed learning about their natural quirks, their folklore, and their subtle magic, because I really loved sharing this with you. It reminded me that wonder often comes in small packages. Until next time, my name is Wish Amaya. Don't forget to keep your roots deep and your dreams wild.